I move these things? Hi. Way too jet lagged and underslept, so which country is this? Alright, so the title of my talk is a cautionary tale not to spell all the beans with your title and subtitle. Let me try to do it anyway. So, contrary to what may appear to be the case, Aleister Crowley, who as the founder of the new religious movement of Thelema, both promulgated and lived by the motto, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," was neither a proponent nor a believer in free will, at least not in the ordinary sense of the term. One of his most intriguing propositions pertinent to the subject was that our life was preordained by us prior to our current embodiment, and that consequently the freedom of will consists in the total acceptance of our fate. This view presupposes the concept of post-mortem existence predicated upon the eternity of the soul, as well as an acceptance of the idea of reincarnation. In what follows, my intention is to interrogate four main issues related to the ideological positions outlined above. One of them concerns the notion of death's complementarity or even identity with life. Another issue relates to Crowley's understanding of the mechanism of reincarnation, where he suggests that the personal volition lies at the root of the process. The third issue is about the equation free will equals destiny and its implications. And finally, intrinsically inseparable from the other topics already mentioned, the reasons for the soul's embodiment imply theological underpinnings, and they could be expressed as follows. The purpose of incarnation is experience, by which process the subject, in the vocabulary of Thelema, Hadith, comes to know its own possibilities through its relations to and responses to the manifest nature of me as an embodied being, Horus as a crowned and conquering child. As a result, the whole life is understood as a sacrament, that's the actual quote from Crowley, as a Eucharist, another quote from Crowley, or as the dance of ecstasy, further quote from Crowley. A discussion of these points, which often mutually overlap and cannot be always treated separately, will provide the substance of this paper. And now, since everybody knows that Crowley is the boogeyman, let's start with something really scary, his poetry. I'm joking, this one is actually quite sublime. Okay, so let me start this exploration with some poetry. In 1946, a year before he passed away, while staying at his last resort, a boarding house known as Netherwood in Hastings, England, Crowley composed a poem entitled Thanatos Basileus, meaning the death of a king, included in what happens to be the last book published during his lifetime, Ola, an anthology of 60 years of song. The content of this short poem resonates implicitly or explicitly with the subject matter under investigation, and it bears quoting at length. Thanatos Basileus. The serpent dips his head beneath the sea, his mother, source of all his energy, eternal, thence to draw the strength he needs on earth to do indomitable deeds once more. And they who saw but understood not of his nature of beatitude were awed. They murmured with abated breath, Alas, the master, so he sinks in death. But whoso knows the mystery of man sees life and death as curves of one same plan. Keeping in mind the subject of present endeavors, it should be apparent that all the four issues mentioned earlier as the topics for explorations are discernible in this poem composed towards the end of Crowley's rich life. He maintained the complementarity of life and death as curves of one same plan, suggested that the energy associated with life, i.e. the soul, was eternal, and implied the fact of reincarnation. The serpent dips his head in order to be born again. While the alterations of life and death are seen as part of one same plan. Finally, the nature of the king, who willingly undergoes the phases of life and death, is one of beatitude. Leaving aside more elaborate interpretation of the numerous symbolic Kabbalistic references in the poem, I will simply take it as a convenient point of departure to explore the topics relevant to the present task at hand. Let me commence with the notion of the complementarity between life and death, which Crowley occasionally extends to the point of arguing the identity between the two. First of all, one may reasonably ask, when did he formulate this position originally? What is the source for this postulation? Assuming that there are no clear-cut answers to this question, I would still suggest that the complementarity of opposites, including life and death, emerged as an article of faith subsequent to the series of magical operations that Crowley and his disciple and lover, Victor Neuburg, conducted in the Algerian part of the Sahara Desert in November and December of 1909. These are chronicled in the book called The Vision and the Voice, and their substance concerns the explorations of the 30atives originally mentioned in the work of the Elizabethan scholar Magus John Dee and his assistant, the scribe Edward Kelly. As a result of these magical operations, Crowley claimed to have crossed the abyss, which, among other things, implied a transcendence of the rational and discursive thinking rooted in dichotomies and the ability to embrace paradox as a key to reality. In the fifth attic, explored on December 13, 1909, Crowley is told in the vision, herein all symbols are interchangeable, for each one contains in itself its own opposite. And this is the great mystery of the supernals that are beyond the abyss. For below the abyss, contradiction is division, but above the abyss, contradiction is unity, and there could be nothing true except by virtue of the contradiction that is contained in itself. End quote. This insight into the correlation between life and death is one of the most important sets of binary opposites, is consequently prominent in Crowley's writings in general, and is, for example, already strongly present in an early work, the 1912 publication, the Book of Lies, where we find statements such as, to beget is to die is to beget, or death is the veil of life, and life of death, for both are gods, or more explicitly, life and death are but life and death are but two phases of one state. Life and death are but two phases of one state. In the comment to his Liber Trigrammaton written in the 1920s, he similarly refers to the vibration which includes life and death as complementary curves. Complementary curves, the same kind of vocabulary as in the poem which I quoted earlier. The same general idea is reaffirmed in the late work, the Book of Thought, published in 1944, discussing the 13th arcana of the tarot. That Crowley writes, and I quote, "The serpent is sacred, lord of life and death, and its method of progression suggests the rhythmical undulations of those twin phases of life, which we call respectively life and death. So kind of, in a sense, life contains life and death as its two phases. Finally, to add just one more example, the mnemonics section in the Book of Thought summarizes the card death with these lines, and I quote, "Eagle and snake and scorpion, the dance of death whirls life from trance to trance to trance." The dance of death whirls life from trance to trance to trance. As will become apparent from subsequent quotations, the correlation between life and death is predicated upon the fact that the soul, or habit in Hellenic vocabulary, is eternal. The most interesting statement in the Thanatos Basileos poem, arguably, lies in its final word, plan. And I would now like to focus on its implications in this particular context. The idea conveyed goes beyond the mere acknowledgement of the process of reincarnation alluded to in the poem, since it suggests that to master another iteration of the theme of the king mentioned in the title, the master undergoes the experience of life and death in a deliberate manner. Put simply, the argument put forward is that our life is planned, and not only that, it also implies that we have planned it ourselves. Taken at face value and out of context, this may appear as nothing more than a poetic fancy, a literary conceit. It may also appear as a mere coincidence that the same word plan was used by Crowley in another poem that expresses the same general idea, the proposition that the experiential and phenomenal circumstances of one's incarnation are presented to a person in the form of one's own design. The poem I'm referring to is the final one of the 22 short compositions originally published in the Heart of the Master under the heading of the 22 Secret Instructions of the Master, and subsequently republished in the Book of Thought as a part of the section entitled General Characters of the Trunks as they appear in use. The poem is associated with the Arcanum 21, the universe, and it goes in part like this. Treat time and all conditions of event as servants of thy will, appointed to present the universe to thee in the form of thy plan. Given the importance and originality of the above idea, I cannot pronounce it, it will be opportune to provide an overview of Crowley's writings that suggest that our current life is a result of the deliberate decision on our part by citing and commenting on pertinent passages in a chronological order to the extent that it is possible. As it will hopefully emerge as an obvious fact, he maintained this position in various iterations, consistently and robustly, whether expressed in major theoretical works or in private letters to his disciples, in poetry, prose, and in fiction. It will also and hopefully become obvious that the core of the issue concerns the question of the relationship between destiny and free will. The subject of will is, needless to say, central to Crowley's doctrine of thelema, which word itself means will in Greek. While the Book of the Law, the foundational document of thelema, specifically mentions pure will, Crowley for the most part operated with the concept of true will. While there is a strong tendency, including deliberate obfuscation, to misinterpret the fundamental maxim of thelema, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, as an expression of licentiousness, Crowley argued vehemently, I might say, that the opposite is true. This statement does not mean do what you like, but instead demands finding one's true will and living in strict accordance with it. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Crowley considered the will as, quote, the most sublimely austere ethical precept ever uttered, despite its apparent license. The problem of the exact relationship between free will, true will, and destiny is paramount for the present discussion, and its solution, as already indicated, could be expressed in the following proposition. Freedom of the will consists in recognizing one's destiny as one's true will. I'll do it one more time. Freedom of the will consists in recognizing one's destiny as one's true will. The practical outcome concomitant to this realization amounts to a Nietzschean precept a la Nietzsche, of amor fati, love of one's fate, the embrace and acceptance of one's fate as one's purpose in life. The difference between the English mystic and the German philosopher being that Crowley emphasizes that personal agency is at the root is the root cause of the shape of one's destiny. Since the full extent of this argument inextricably implies the issue of reincarnation, I will treat it simultaneously with the interrogation of the subject of the free will and destiny. I will now substantiate these remarks with a discussion of selected quotations from Crowley's works. Crowley's earliest reference to the subject of reincarnation was influenced by his Buddhist doctrinal teachings that he was exposed to aside from the access to literary sources through a friendship with his mentor and former Golden Dawn colleague, Alan Bennett. Crowley's gradual distancing from Buddhism influenced also his views on this particular topic. The first major work in which he proposes personal agency as a deciding factor in the process of rebirth is expressed in the canon of Gnostic Mass, composed in Moscow in 1913, which contains, among other things, a selection of 11 collects, the final one of which, entitled The End, proclaims as follows. Unto them from whose eyes the veil of life had fallen, may there be granted the accomplishment of their true wills, whether they will absorption in the infinite, or to be united with their chosen and preferred, or to be in contemplation, or to be at peace, or to achieve the labor and heroism of incarnation on this planet, or another, or in any star, or aught else, unto them may there be granted the accomplishment of their wills. Yeah, the accomplishment of their wills. The difference between the view expressed here in the above excerpt in the Gnostic Mass and the traditional Buddhist and Hindu views lies in the fact that, according to the position of the traditional Asian religions, it is the force of one's previous actions, one's past karma, that determines the current conditions of embodiment. Crowley does not fully reject the theory of karma, but he modifies it in such a way that allows him to introduce the concept of volition into the workings of the process of reincarnation. While the importance of will is obviously paramount to Crowley's overall philosophy, to suggest that the labor and heroism of incarnation is tantamount to the accomplishment of people's will. To be incarnated means to accomplish one's will. This proposition, perhaps counterintuitively, simultaneously brings into correlation the issue of the relationship between free will and fate. Crowley's solution, as already stated, was to equate them, one's will and one's fate. One of the most explicit exposition of this idea is given in the following quotation from Liber Aleph, a book written in New York City in 1918 as a series of letters to his magical son, Charles Stansfield Jones. Significantly, the pertinent chapter is entitled De Harmonia Voluntatis et Percarum, i.e., on the harmony of will and fate, on the harmony of will and fate, and it suggests, this is the evident and final solvent of the not philosophical concerning faith and free will, that it is thine own self, omniscient and omnipotent, sublime in eternity, that first didst order the course of thine own orbit, so that that which befalleth thee by faith is indeed a necessary effect of thine own will. There are three major points enunciated in the quote, which otherwise it bears mentioning, consist of one sentence only. First, one's own self, or in Hellenic parlance, hadit, is omniscient and omnipotent and sublime in eternity. This is reminiscent of another statement from the Gnostic Mass, as found in the section that lays out the creed of the Gnostic Catholic Church, where one professes, and I confess my one life, and I confess my life one, individual and eternal, that was and is to come. Another point to note in the quote from Liber Aleph is that the self orders the course of one's orbit, which is a declaration rather similar to the employment of the word plan, discussed previously in a similar context. And finally, the state of affairs described in the quote dictates the conclusion that what happens to us in the form of our destiny or fate is a necessary effect of our own will. The same point of view expressed in a poem that opens the programmatic text One Star in Sight, written in 1922, in which the full overview of the system of the AA, another organization run by Crowley, is described in detail. Two stanzas from this poem are relevant here, and they go like this. All souls eternally exist, each individual, ultimate, perfect. Each makes itself a mist of mind and flesh. A mist of mind and flesh, to celebrate with some twin mask the tender tryst insatiate. Some drunkards doting on a dream despair that it should die, mistake themselves for their own shadow scheme. One star can summon them to wake to self. Star souls serene but gleam on life's calm lake. Here, eternity is again attributed to the soul, as well as perfection, which it needs to be emphasized, is not reserved for some exceptional cases, but is in fact assigned to all. All souls are perfect eternally, etc., etc. The souls that again described as engaged in a deliberate activity of entering into an embodied existence by making a mist of mind and flesh. It is to be noted that the souls are not bound to reincarnation by the force of anything comparable to the idea of impersonal karma, which operates mechanically, nor are they entering the material universe as a form of punishment. Quite the contrary. The soul incarnates in order to celebrate with some twin mask their tender tryst, their tender love, romance making, etc. Let me pause here for a moment to restate and reinforce this particular idea with several appropriate quotes from Crowley's writings. In his Confessions, published in 1929, he describes the second degree of the OTO as being concerned with the Eucharist of life. The symbolism, the purpose expressed in the second degree of the OTO, which deals with the mystery of life, is to it concerns the Eucharist of life. Life is a Eucharist. Okay? In his new comment to Book of the Law, chapter 2, verse 9, written in chapel in the early 1920s, he writes that, quote, "We understand the truth of things, how all is a dance of ecstasy." Finally, to provide just one more illustration of this idea, there is a mention of Liber Aleph of what Crowley designates as the great oath, and which refers to, quote, incarnating without remission because of the light in the cosmic sacrament. So souls are not reincarnated as a result of impersonal karma. They are not punished. They go deliberately for the purpose of experiencing delight in the cosmic sacrament. I will interrogate theological implications of this deliberate intent to incarnate for the purpose of the celebration of the tender chest, the enjoyment of the Eucharist of life, or partaking of the cosmic sacrament in my concluding remarks. There is a similar thing described in the chapter 16 of Crowley's novel Moonchild. I will skip this part because I think I'm running a bit of time, running out of time. So I will just continue. The personal agency, and by person I mean one's essential self, involved in the act of creating causal factors that manifest as one's destiny, is explicitly enunciated by Crowley in his introduction to the 1938 publication of the Book of the Law, where he argues, quote, every event, including death, is only one more accretion to our experience, freely willed by ourselves from the beginning, and therefore also predestined. End quote. In a letter to his disciple Karl Gerner, written in March 26, 1943, he again conveys the same important point quite explicitly. A similar problem arises in regard to the philosophical question of destiny and true will. The Thalamic solution is that although every action of ours is determined by previous conditions, yet the particular series with which we are concerned was originally dictated by ourselves. I will not say from eternity, but in eternity. End quote. In a letter written to disciple Anne Mackey, written in November 1943, some 8 months after that letter to Gerner, he again similarly insists that, quote, every experience is a necessary step and in accord with one's true will, for it is oneself and not another that originally determined the conditions of this life. End quote. At this point, one may be expected to ask if our current embodiment is a result of our own plan, if we have forged the links that bind us to the contingencies of our everyday predicament, if it is ourselves and not another that originally determined the conditions of this life, why are then most, if not all of us, unaware of this state of affairs, of this plan? Some sort of Platonic amnesia has obviously entered into the process of incarnating into the phenomenal universe within the confines of our individual minds and bodies as an inescapable condition of the event. To my knowledge, Crowley does not provide a fully constructed explanatory theory of this aspect of things, but he does offer some helpful assertions, clues, and allusions. For example, in his Liber Samec, he writes, he brings up the subject of incarnation and declares, quote, the object of incarnation is to obtain articulate apprehension of the soul by measuring its reactions to its relations with other incarnated beings and to observe theirs with each other, their reactions. However, the conditions of incarnation presuppose appropriate restrictions, as explained in the following segment. Quote, a soul implants itself in a sense-hoodwinked body and reason-fettered mind, makes them aware of their inmate. Their inmate is their soul. And thus to partake of its own consciousness of the light. end quote. Crowley seems to suggest that the soul intentionally hides for the purpose and joy of rediscovery. Self-discovery or self-rediscovery. Another proposal can be found in Magic Without Tears, written in the 1940s, where he explains that as far as the adherents of the lemma are concerned, quote, our aim is that our nothing, which we were originally, and nothing is for Crowley perfection. So, our aim is that our nothing, ideally perfect as it is in itself, should enjoy itself through realizing itself in the fulfillment of its possibilities. All such phenomena or point events are equally illusion. Nothing is always nothing, but the projection of nothing on the screen of the phenomenal does not only explain, but constitutes the universe. Original perfection, which is nothing, projects itself on the screen of the phenomena, and in this way creates and constitutes the universe. And that also explains the universe. Why does the universe exist, etc.? Because of this original projection, for the purpose of realizing one's possibilities. Okay. The previous two examples suggest that on the one hand, the restrictions concomitant to the condition of embodiment imply that the soul indwells as inmate the imperfect body and mind, while on the other hand, the illusory nature of the phenomena is likened to an experiential field onto which the soul projects itself for the purpose of enjoying its possibilities. A chapter in the Liber Aleph, entitled An Allegory of Chess, compares the nature of existence in the phenomenal universe to a game in which the restrictions, in other words, the rules, are actually the factors that provide the enjoyment in the play. He argues, thus unto the person this game is as it were an illusion, but insofar as he entered into the game, and you can apply this totally to the issue of incarnation or reincarnation, but insofar as he entered into the game, he abided by the rules thereof. Though they may be artificial and in no wise proper to his nature, for in this restriction is all displeasure. Therefore, though he had all power to move the pieces of chess as his own will, he doth it not, enduring loss, indignity, and defeat, rather than destroying the artifice of illusion. Think then that thou hast thyself created this shadow world, the universe, and that it pleasured thee to watch or to actuate its play according to the law that thou hast made, which yet bindeth thee, not save only by virtue of thine own will, to do thine all pleasure therein. This could be expanded. I have no time into kind of this whole theory of a divine play or Leela as an explanation for the existence of the world. I have not. Oh, I'm almost done. Okay. In the final instance, and by way of conclusion, the theological foundation for the position that the experience of reincarnation is both a source of pleasure and a learning opportunity for self-discovery lies in the nature of the two main Thelemic deities, Nuit and Hadit. In simplified terms, Nuit represents all the infinite possibilities of existence, while Hadit is an essential core of every human being, whose main prerogative is the ability to be conscious, to know, to be conscious of Nuit. Crowley compares them, among other things, to Shiva and Shakti, emphasizing their complementarity, which is often described in erotic metaphors. Their interaction constitutes the universe that a person is conscious of. The universe is a puppet play this is a quote, "The universe is a puppet play for the amusement of Nuit and Hadith in their nuptials, a very midsummer night's dream. A child, or the marriage of Nuit Hadith, is referred to as the crowned and conquering child, which is essentially each one of us, while embodied in the phenomenal universe." And this is the quote, "The whole universe and all in it that there is, what is it but the infinite playground of the crowned and conquering child, of the insatiable, the innocent, the ever-rejoicing heir of space and eternity." I have one more paragraph. Is it okay if I maybe go a few minutes beyond? I'm not sure who am I asking, but I'll just go. Okay.
You're doing great. Go for it.
Thank you. As we have seen illustrated in many instances by relevant quotations, this playground, this puppet play, this game of chess, with its restrictions that constitute the rules of the game to be enjoyed, is preordained or planned by each one of us in eternity, so that what manifests to us in the shape of our lives must indeed be acknowledged as the identification of fate with free will. But, and this is crucial, what constitutes an universe for each one of us is equivalent with the extent of our consciousness. Quote, "The universe includes all possible phenomena of which a person can be aware." End quote. It then follows that if the purpose behind Soul's or Hadith's intention to incarnate is so that it should enjoy itself through realizing itself in the fulfillment of its possibilities, this can be rephrased to as the purpose of Hadith is to incarnate so that it can become aware of some of the infinite aspects of Nuit. This can further be expressed as the purpose behind incarnation is ultimately experience. Quote, "This then is reality, direct experience," end quote, by Crowley. And since the experience presupposes consciousness or awareness of it, it may be argued that Crowley is relatively close to those philosophical positions that privilege pure consciousness as the ultimate reality and ground of existence. His specific position differs in this regard. According to the Thelemic doctrine based on the Book of the Law, the pure consciousness, Hadith, cannot know itself except by way of learning its characteristics through the contact with or the knowledge of Nuit. And so in the end, we can posit that the purpose of reincarnating over and over again is ultimately, as far as Hadith is concerned, to follow the love of Nu in starlit heaven, and for each one of us as an embodied being to do our pleasure on the earth among the legions of the living. Thank you. You're too kind.
Thank you so much, Gordan.